It's extremely rare for Stephen A. Smith to say anything about the Toronto Raptors, but when he does, it's usually something extremely out of pocket. And in this scenario, talking about the 2019 championship Raptors, it is no different. Let's get into it. If you don't already know, this is Amateur Hour TV. It is the second channel for Amateur Hour Sports, where we go through additional Toronto Raptors content in videos just like this, where the vibes a little bit different, a little bit less formal, a little bit more personality comes through. I just want to talk ball over here. That's what we're doing. Stephen A. Smith has sounded off on the 2019 Raptors championship team in saying that if you replaced Kawhi Leonard with DeMar DeRozan on that 2019 Raptors roster, the Toronto Raptors still would have won the NBA championship. And the reasoning behind that, LeBron wasn't in the Eastern Conference that year. So, Stephen A. Smith, ESPN, I mean, we already know people of ESPN, they don't talk a lot about the Toronto Raptors. They don't talk a lot about the Raptors there. Certainly, there are some analysts within ESPN who do talk about the Raptors, give their respect to the Raptors, and treat them like an actual part of this league. And guys like Zach Lowe, Brian Windhorst, maybe to a lesser degree, Tim Bontemps. There are people out there who show respect to this franchise, but with the bigger shows like First Take, Stephen A. Smith, usually they don't. And, part of me doesn't like that because I wish, these big news outlets would cover the Raptors. Part of me understands it. It's all about ratings. American national TV probably don't really have a ton of interest in the Raptors. And, for these guys like Stephen A., who have to cover so many teams in the NBA and so many leagues sometimes, like sometimes he's covering the NBA along with the NFL, he doesn't have time to cover the Raptors. And since he's not covering the Raptors, he's not watching the Raptors, he's not following the Raptors. He knows very little about the Raptors, and every time he opens his mouth and speaks about this team, it reaffirms the notion that he doesn't know anything about the Raptors. And this is another example of him showcasing that in saying DeMar DeRozan would have won with the Raptors in 2019 just like Kawhi Leonard. And this has been in a recent span of hate that Stephen A. Smith is showing towards Kawhi Leonard lately because of the player and his injuries. And sure, I would have my beef with Kawhi Leonard as well for the amount of games he's missing. I mean, missing 3 games in the playoffs when it seems like, I don't know what's going on there. I don't want to doubt a guy's not going to play in the playoffs, but man, in a tight series with the Suns, a lot is riding on this season. It's kind of strange that he has missed games 3 and 4, and is also going to be missing game 5 for the Los Angeles Clippers. So, Stephen A. Smith has sounded off a bunch of times against Kawhi Leonard, but the hate has gotten so far that he's comparing Kawhi Leonard to DeMar DeRozan. I mean, come on, man. Let's go through the road to the championship for the Raptors. So obviously, LeBron not being in the East, that was a big deal. The 3 years prior to that 2019 championship, the Raptors lost to LeBron James in the playoffs. First of those 3 was in a conference final where the Raptors lost in 6 games. The last of those 3s were when the Raptors were a 1 seed against the Cavaliers in 2018, who were the 4 seed, and the Raptors got swept. That ultimately was the nail in the coffin on the DeMar DeRozan era. Masai Ujiri shipped him off to the San Antonio Spurs along with Jakob Poeltl reluctantly and a first-round pick, and in return they got Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green. And though I consistently advocate that, this was a damn good basketball team, maybe it's Stephen A. showing a bit of respect, but I think it's a little bit too much respect going to DeMar DeRozan here, because the reality is he could not have done what Kawhi Leonard did. Kawhi Leonard did not carry us to the championship, but he was the most important part of it. And in some games along the way, like Game 7 against the Philadelphia 76ers, Game 1 against the 76ers, maybe Game 6 against the Bucks, yeah, this guy definitely kind of carried us in those games. So let's go through all 4 of the series for the Raptors win the championship. Talk about how it would have been different if you had DeMar DeRozan instead of Kawhi Leonard. So, first round against Orlando, Raptors lose Game 1. They win the next 4. Probably still comfortably beat Orlando, even with DeMar DeRozan there. Would it have been 6 games? I think they still win in 5 in that series, but they still win. Where I'm focused on is the second round against the 76ers. People really downplay how unbelievably good that 76ers team was. They had Ben Simmons at his peak. They had Joel Embiid. They had Jimmy Butler. They had Tobias Harris. 4 like all-star caliber players. And like the perfect complementary player in JJ Redick as the fifth man. One of the best shooters in NBA history. I would say the best, like top 3 all time in off-ball movement to get open for three-pointers. That was their starting 5. That team is disrespected because they lost in the second round, but oh my goodness. The Raptors, the amount of work they had to put in to stop that team and the amount that we needed from Kawhi to will us to victory, especially in that game 7, I don't want to like disrespect my team here, but the Raptors, I just can't see them beating that good of a Sixers team without Kawhi Leonard. I just can't. And then in the conference finals, like let alone the Sixers, you get to the conference finals, you're playing MVP Giannis, you're playing the Bucks, I think at like their strongest level back when they had Malcolm Brogdon on the team. How do you stop Giannis without Kawhi Leonard? Think about DeMar DeRozan instead of Kawhi Leonard in that series. A massive turning point in that series was the game 3 where we finally started using Kawhi Leonard on Giannis. And Giannis spoke about years later, Giannis spoke about Kawhi Leonard and Marc Gasol double teams. You know, Marc Gasol, obviously a formidable defender in his own right, but without Kawhi Leonard being able to match the levels of Giannis defensively, how do we stop Giannis? How do we go and win that series? And the offensive output from Kawhi over the course of those 4 wins in a row, where the Raptors win games 3, 4, 5, and 6 to go to the NBA Finals, like DeMar DeRozan doesn't do that. And so many of those 2 series, the games in those 2 series the Raptors win, it really comes down to the wire. I don't want to just use this card, but man, how consistently as Raptors fans did we see DeMar DeRozan not live up to the billing in the playoffs? And, you know, a lot of that can be put on Dwayne Casey for the style of play. I mean, Dwayne Casey ISO ball in the playoffs, that was a big reason he got fired after winning Coach of the Year in 2018. He brought in Nick Nurse, and you know, it's kind of funny what led to the demise maybe of Nick Nurse was his ISO ball in fourth quarter situations, but for the early days of Nick Nurse, that wasn't really the case for this team. It was matchup centric. It was exploiting matchups, going to the best matchup that we had on the court. A lot of that was what Kyle Lowry brought to this team as well. But Nick Nurse ran this team differently than what Dwayne Casey did. And by the way, Stephen A. Smith added that Dwayne Casey would have won us a championship as well instead of Nick Nurse, which I also quite resent that sort of thought too. But sticking to Kawhi Leonard, DeMar DeRozan, you just don't beat the Sixers. And if you somehow do, you don't beat that Bucks team without Kawhi Leonard. When you get to the NBA Finals, that's where I think it's a little bit different there, because I felt as though Kawhi Leonard was the absolute driving force of the second and third round. Whereas we got to the NBA Finals, it was much more shared. Like Siakam had a great series. Fred VanVleet had an absolutely outstanding series. The fact that Kawhi Leonard, as good as he was, did not win unanimous Finals MVP because Fred VanVleet got a vote for Finals MVP just goes to show you how well Fred VanVleet played in that series. Kyle Lowry as well was no slap. I mean, Kyle Lowry in that Game 6, the championship clinching game, was phenomenal. Gasol had a great series. Ibaka had a great series. We needed a lot of guys to step up. Danny Green kind of sucked, but he was he was doing his job from the start. Then we brought in Fred VanVleet to close games. You know what I'm saying? But I think matchup wise, you maybe had enough against the Warriors. After all, Kevin Durant was injured for all but like 1.5 quarters of that series. But you don't get to that final without the defensive work Kawhi Leonard had, the defensive game Kawhi Leonard had, and the offensive game. The games where the Raptors struggled to score, like that Game 7 against Philly, where he was just, give him the ball, get out of his way, he'll win us the game. He won us the game there. DeMar doesn't do that. He's had a lot of chances to try and do that. He doesn't do that. He hasn't done that. He's never done that in the playoffs in his career. Kawhi Leonard did that shit, and that was one of the all-time great individual playoff runs that I am aware of in NBA history. So DeMar DeRozan matching Kawhi's output for that 2019 championship, I think this is more of Stephen A. trying to hate on Kawhi Leonard rather than trying to big up DeMar DeRozan in this scenario. For some reason, Stephen A. Smith is attacking Kawhi Leonard. I mean, we understand what's the injury stuff. Stephen A. Smith wants to attack Kawhi Leonard this week. This is the way he's trying to do it. But, I mean, I think there are better ways to do this, Stephen. I think there are better ways to do this, Mr. Smith, because I don't think DeRozan reaches those levels of Kawhi Leonard. Now, this is not me saying once again that this is not me saying Kawhi Leonard carried us. We can't, but that like he had no team. Kawhi had a great supporting cast around him. We're seeing guys need supporting casts, but I'm also saying Kawhi Leonard was the reason we got the championship in the end. He was the catalyst. He was the driving force, and we don't get there without him. It was smart for Masai to gamble and move on from DeRozan. Obviously, there's a ring to say that it was smart to do it, and I supported it at the time. There's a lot of Raptors fans who didn't like it at the time, but hey, the DeRozan era hit its ceiling. We rolled the dice on an upgrade on Kawhi Leonard. It worked out. NBA champions, the rest is history. Bottom line, this doesn't happen without Kawhi. All right, guys, what do you think? Could the Raptors have won the championship if you replaced DeMar DeRozan replace Kawhi Leonard with DeMar DeRozan? Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. That is it for me for today. If you did enjoy, hit that like button and consider subscribing for more content like this on Amateur Hour TV. All of the buttons around me here, the other channels in the Amateur Hour Production Network. Amateur Hour Sports, my main channel. Amateur Hour Reaction, rebranded. The best highlights from my Amateur Hour Sports streams, and Amateur Hour Betting, Amateur Hour Bets for my educational betting content. We'll see you again next time for another video.